Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Unsolved Mystery Series, episode 96. Today we're going deep into a case that really shook the community of Kharghar, India. The Kharghar Triple Murder.
Yeah, it's one of those cases that really sticks with you, you know? It all starts so normal. We have the Sharma family, Sandeep, Neelam, and their 12-year-old daughter, Avni, living a pretty normal life. But then everything changes.
Right. It's April 12, 2018. We see the Sharma family coming home from an outing. They seem happy, like any other family. But the very next morning, their housekeeper finds their doors locked. She calls security, and, well, that's when things take a very dark turn.
Yeah, the police get to the apartment, and what they find inside is horrifying. Sandeep, the father, he's found bludgeoned to death. Looks like he was trying to defend his family. Neelam, the mother, she's been stabbed multiple times. Police think maybe she tried to run. And then there's Avni, their daughter, found strangled in her bedroom. The brutality of it all, especially happening in their own home, is just, well, it's unsettling.
Yeah, you can't even imagine what that must have been like. And the crime scene itself, it's just full of mysteries. There's no sign of forced entry.
And that right there, that's a big one. It tells us the killer probably knew the family. Or at least tricked them into letting them in. It can't have been some random act this was planned.
So if it wasn't random, then what was it? Was it a robbery? I mean, some jewelry and cash were missing?
That's what they thought at first. But something didn't sit right. A lot of valuable stuff was left behind. You'd think if it was just about robbery, they would have taken everything.
Right. It seems like they had something else in mind, like they were there for a specific reason. Which brings us to motive.
Absolutely. So the police start digging into other things. First, they look for personal vendettas. They look into Sandeep's business, Neelam's friends, looking for any kind of hidden conflicts.
Makes sense. So did they find anything that could point to a motive?
They found a few things, like a former employee of Sandeep's who was unhappy, some arguments with Neelam's friends, stuff like that. But nothing strong enough to suggest murder. So maybe it was a personal vendetta, but they didn't have the proof.
Okay, so we've got a brutal scene, no forced entry, and maybe a vendetta, but they're not sure. What other clues did the police have?
Well, there's this one piece of evidence that keeps coming up, the CCTV footage.
Ah, the hooded figure entering the building around 11 p.m. that night and then leaving about an hour later. They couldn't identify them, though, right?
Right. Face was hidden. So now they're trying to figure out, was this the killer? Were they working with others? Or just a coincidence? More questions than answers.
It feels like every time we learn something new, it just leads to even more questions. What did the police do next with what they had?
So the investigators were looking at this really complicated situation, and they had to try and figure out what happened. They had to consider every angle and try to fit all the pieces together.
Yeah, it's like a giant puzzle, right? So let's go through those possible motives one by one and see if any of them actually fit. We already talked about robbery, but it doesn't quite make sense.
No, you're right, it doesn't. I mean, the amount of violence used against this family doesn't really fit with a normal robbery. And then there's the fact that they took certain things, but left other valuables behind.
Yeah, it almost feels like maybe they were trying to throw the police off.
Yeah.
Like make it look like a robbery when it was really something else.
Exactly. They had to consider that, too. Remember, everything points to the killer knowing the victims personally. No forced entry, remember? So they went back to that personal vendetta theory, looking at everything about Sandeep and Neelam's lives.
Like what kind of things?
Well, think about it. We all have so many little interactions every day. Work, social events, even just bumping into someone on the street. Any of those could turn into a conflict, a grudge, something that could lead to violence. So police looked at every deal Sandeep made, every client he had, every competitor.
And I guess for Neelam, they looked at all her friends, right? Looking for fights, jealousy, any relationship that went bad.
Exactly. They had to check everything, phone records, emails, social media. They talked to anyone who knew them, even a little bit. In a case like this, you can't ignore anything.
Did they find anything useful when looking into their personal lives?
A few things came up. Some people who had minor disagreements with the Sharmas, but nothing that really screamed motive for murder. The vendetta was still possible, but they didn't have a specific person in mind.
So we're kind of back where we started. Robbery doesn't quite fit. Personal vendettas are a maybe, but they're not sure. What else did the police consider?
Well, because the attack seemed so planned and so brutal, and they couldn't figure out why it happened, they had to think about a scary possibility: hired killers.
Whoa, like professional assassins. That sounds like something out of a movie. But who would want them dead? And why?
Right, those are the big questions. If we're thinking about hitmen, we need to figure out who would benefit from the Sharmas being gone. Was it about money, maybe an inheritance or insurance policy, or was it more personal, like someone wanted them silenced for good?
So we're going down a rabbit hole here. But even if it was a hit, how would they even prove that?
It wouldn't be easy. You'd have to connect the Sharmas to someone who could hire these killers, someone with the money and a reason to do it. That means digging into the world of organized crime, which is dangerous and unpredictable. They'd have to track money, find secret messages, maybe even go undercover.
It does sound like something out of a movie. But let's say they did find a connection to organized crime. Then what?
Even if they found proof that hitmen were involved, the next hurdle would be finding out who ordered the hit. It's a tough job and often pretty dangerous, and it takes a lot of resources and dedication.
So hired killers are definitely a possibility, but it sounds like it would be really hard to prove.
Yeah. So then there's one more theory, and it seems simple at first, but then it just brings up more questions. Maybe it was a single person acting alone, maybe with a personal grudge or some kind of mental issue.
That does kind of make sense, since it seems so targeted. But now we're trying to figure out who this person was, why they would target this family, and what made them snap and do something so terrible.
And those are the questions that are still bothering the investigators. They haven't found a suspect, and that makes it even harder. Remember, this was a well-liked family. They didn't seem to have enemies. Finding someone with a strong enough reason to do something so violent has been really difficult.
It feels like we're going in circles, you know?
Yeah.
Every answer leads to more questions. Was there anything else the police looked at? Any other clues? Going through all of this, it's hard not to get lost in all the theories and the evidence. But it's important to remember that this is about a real family, a family that was destroyed.
Right. We can't forget that behind all of this, there are real people who lost their loved ones. The Sharmas' friends and family, they're left with this unbelievable grief. They had to bury them without knowing who did it or why.
Yeah, and that lack of closure must make it so much harder. Not only the loss, but not having any answers.
And it goes beyond just the family. The whole community of Kharghar was affected. This wasn't some isolated incident. This kind of thing makes everyone feel less safe.
Exactly. It's a reminder that no matter where you live, something terrible could happen. I imagine people were scared.
Oh, absolutely. People started to wonder, are we really safe in our own homes? Could this happen to us? And when there's no clear answer, that fear just gets worse.
And without answers, people will come up with their own.
Of course. With no arrest, the rumors start flying. Some people stick to the robbery idea. Others talk about secret grudges, hidden affairs. It's human nature to try and make sense of something so awful. But a lot of times, those rumors just make things worse, more confusing, and more painful for everyone involved.
So what happened as time went on? Did the community eventually move on, even without an arrest?
I mean, life goes on, right? But for the people who were closest to the Sharmas, I don't think they ever really healed. Not knowing what happened, why it happened, who did it, that stays with you.
It's a sad reminder that even after so long, the effects of something like this linger.
This case is a wake-up call for all of us about being aware of our surroundings and supporting each other. After something like this, it's important to come together, not just to mourn, but to support those who are hurting and to demand answers.
Yeah, and it shows how important it is for the police to be open with the community. When people feel like they're being kept in the dark, it just creates distrust.
You're right. Open communication is key. Keeping people updated about the investigation, showing that they're truly dedicated to finding the truth, that's how you start to rebuild trust and heal.
So where are we now? It's still unsolved, but does that mean there's no hope?
Not at all. Cold cases get solved all the time, sometimes years, even decades later. New evidence can come up, witnesses decide to talk, technology gets better. You never know.
That's why we do this show, Keep these stories in the public eye, keep asking questions, and never give up on finding the truth. Someone listening might know something small that they think doesn't matter, but it could be the missing piece.
That's the power of these deep dives. We're not just telling a story, we're having a conversation with you, the listener. We want to hear your thoughts, your theories.
Exactly. If you have any information about the Kharghar Triple Murder, even if you think it's not important, please contact the authorities. Your tip could be the one that finally brings justice.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the Kharghar Triple Murder. It's been a tough case to discuss, but an important one. We hope this episode helped shed some light on this tragedy.
Remember, even when things seem dark, we can't give up hope for justice. And sometimes, even the smallest detail can change everything. Make sure you subscribe to CrimePod Castle for more deep dives into India's most puzzling mysteries. And if you like this episode, leave us a review and tell your friends.
Stay curious, stay vigilant, and as always, stay safe.